And now let's see. Mackenzie, you are visible in.
Why did you have to tell me
if
that?
you want to say something really significant, there's a camera over there.
No.
All right. All right, let's pray and we'll start. Lord, thank you for good testimonies today. Thank you for grace and mercy of God. Thank you for the lessons we learn. Thank you for the privilege of anticipating pure Christ-likeness someday. But thank you that along the way, you are making us more like him little by little. And I pray that what we talk about today in this case study, in our discussion, would further that in our lives as your Spirit applies what we're discussing. Thank you for Kenzie. Thank you for this class. In Jesus' name. Kenzie, you are free to present.
Okay, so my case study was called Process Turn Action. It starts with our characters, Ian Cox and David Stoller. They are having to make a decision about something. So as they were they sat silently as they reviewed in mind the past 4 days they had spent in Honduras, now which seemed a lifetime ago. They had both come to Latin America headquarters for the development aid to assist a local staff in assisting the needs of the Salvadoran refugees who were crossing into Honduras, to decide whether or not a relief project should be initiated. Ian headed up the survey, and David provided logistical support. They were joined in Honduras by Mario, who is a development aid staff person responsible for the local office and the projects in that province. It is and help providing for most of the refugees. Mario reported that several hundred refugees had been discovered along a 120-mile section of the Salvador-Honduras border due to the situation that was going on. The director of development aid in Honduras asked Ian to design a response strategy to help these refugees. Mario was assigned to work with Ian and survey this area. Ian and David flew in to the capital, and the only town with a landing strip, so they were contacted by local military officers who were governing the province to obtain information about the refugee situation to secure permission to survey the area. Once that information was provided, they learned more about the refugees and their conditions. It was fair. They received basic food, shelter, and basic living things. It was pretty. They got their basic needs and more, no less. There's no official position in the government regarding the refugees, as told from a military representative that weren't Ian. However, we consider them undocumented, and any aid given to them will only encourage them continue immigrating into Honduras. You realize that, don't you, that they are a major cause of the problem in El Salvador, and we don't want them here. Most of the border between Honduras and El Salvador is made up of rivers. The range 50 yards to 150 yards, depending on the season. Most of the refugees come during different times, and most of them are old men, women, children that were trying to escape what was going on in their homeland. Ian was aware of what was going on because he was raised in the area and was aware of the historical sensitivity of the border and the war that had been fought between El Salvador and Honduras 12 years ago. No official peace was signed, but after exhausting their resources, they kind of just ceased fire, and there was nothing really done after that. They simply just accepted the good service of the Organization of American States. This international body established a free zone, which is a strip of land between Honduras and El Salvador, that could not be controlled by military of any of the countries that this area was in. Since the monitoring was more of like a symbolic thing than really enforced, this was the ideal free zone for freedom fighters so they could train and harbor their families. The proximity near freedom fighters was a constant threat through the military, and the retaliation of the free zone kept the Honduras government in a state of nervous tension. Development aid began community development projects in El Salvador and Honduras 5 years prior to even Ian's visit. Development was conducted through and tried to create relationships with both of the countries to remain cordial. And the governments recognized that development aid was mandatory for their work to continue with support. Shortly after their arrival, they met Father Waters, who lived close to this area and was interested in helping. He had a place that development aid could use to start a closer local office to this area, and he offered her to be able to be used as storing for supplies, anything that could be needed. He would have the building and try to have people to provide for that. 4 days later, Ian and David had returned, before they were going to be returning to the headquarters. Father Water visited them in their hotel holding a letter and some different things, and told them about what he was holding. Father Waters asked, "Are you aware of the massacre that occurred 10 days ago where 614 Salvadoran refugees tried to cross into Honduras and were shot to death in the river? We have proof that the government of Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala conspired to stop these people. This massacre occurred shortly after the conference between all the presidents in the country, and initially 801 I can't read. 800 to 1,000 old men, women, and children were set to cross the river and were all shot down on the banks of the shore. A lot of the evidence was found by fishermen, and many of the things were all identified by local and even some of the survivors that had tried to cross and then crossed a few days later. Now, Father Waters has asked them if they would be willing to help them become public with the actions of these countries. And wants to get them both so they can expose this to the world, as Christians throughout the world should know what's going on and should join us in making these governments accountable for what they have done. We are asking church leaders, business people, and other governments to support in what is going on and try to help stop it. Ian and David had looked at these documents and know that a lot of what is going on is wrong. But would it help for them to be signing it? They had prayed and sat there for a while, and Father Waters said that he would return back tomorrow for an answer. Marios was the first to speak and asking Ian if he should sign. Can they do anything? Should they speak out? They used Jeremiah 9:3. God condemns the Israelites for not speaking the truth. They bent their tongues like bows, and falsehood not truth has grown strong in the land. For they produce from evil to evil, and they do not know me, says the Lord. His response is, "What we do know the word, and we must speak his name," was David's response. But there's But no way they can sign that, as they would need, representatives of development aid, they would need more than just them to be able to sign this for this to go through. Do they have the authority to do this, or would this jeopardize other missions that they have in Africa and Asia? Would that interrupt anything in their mission if they sign this document as a would seen as be radical behavior? Besides, in the 5 years with development aid, much of our success is working under different governments, having been due to the fact that we have not gotten involved in local politics. Furthermore, signing would make a threat to our mission, and then we would not be able to help. So they have to. So the main question is would it be benefit them to sign this document, or would it harm their mission? My answer to that question is I do think that what happened needs to be brought to light, but signing and trying to bring this to light with development aid's name under it is not going to help their mission. It's going to harm it, because they do work with local governments, so they need to try to keep in good graces, and they don't need to try to disrupt other missions too, because not only is they were only doing a survey project, I'm not sure how much power they would have to really say anything, nor would they have the permission of the missions agency itself that they're under. I believe that they could try to set something up so this doesn't happen again. They have someone there that has a building that is closer to where all these refugees are kind of crossing through, that they could set up something in what should really be kind of like a no man's land, where they have some people there of the freedom fighters and that, where they can get close but not amongst where there's a lot of turmoil going on, but be able to help them as much as they can, even with some of the tension that's there, because the countries do need help. Looking at this case, I can see that they want to make a lot of changes, but right now they still don't know enough about how many refugees are crossing over, how much aid they could possibly bring, but the area does need help, but I don't believe that trying to putting their name of bringing the massacre kind of up to light with their name attached to it would be any help. There needs to be a neutral space that they can stay in because of the tension that's already there. If they keep neutral, they're able to stay and maybe help prevent something like that from happening in the future. Of course, we really don't know. It's really up to God of what they're going to be able to do. But I do believe that the world does need to know what's going on and see if there are other people that can help also back behind of what happened in this situation. If you want to turn with me from Ecclesiastes 3, a lot of talking there. Some of that it was talking about is to everything that there is a season, a time for purpose under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, and a time to plan of what we planted. So there's a time and place for everything, and at this time, needs to be aware of the tension that's going on and really need to be praying about that, as I've kind of stated a few times, that what happened, the massacre was wrong, and there was really no point to really do that. I do understand that there's tension in the countries, but the mission development aid should not be trying to sign anything to go along with it to not help further the tension. And then I have Romans 12, 17 through 21. Repay no evil for evil, have regard for good things in the sight of all men, if possible, as much as dependent on you live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourself, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, and I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he thirsts, give him a drink, for in this you will be heaping coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Those are my thoughts.
All right. This is different. This is unlike any that we've talked about. What are your thoughts? Yeah, Jay.
Can I use the bathroom real quick?
Profound. That was profound. I think we should all stop and think about that one. Go ahead, guys.
You said, like, in the middle of your presentation that you think there could be ways that they could prevent something like that from happening
I think
again.
if they have something where they have a place where refugees start to go, that they can kind of prevent what happened, because at the moment refugees are just crossing at kind of in a no man's land, kind of hoping that nothing goes wrong. If they have a place to actually go to, because right now they're just going into one from where are they going to? Sorry, my brain is kind of everywhere.
Which country?
Yeah.
They're going in from Honduras.
Yeah. If they have something set up close enough to where they have a certain place where refugees start going, then the government can't. They can try to get in the way, but it's gonna make it a little bit harder if there's an actual place where refugees can actually set up rather than just dropping into the country.
Sure.
Because from what I understand is they're going across this river at all different times where the government was able to literally just come from all sides and trap them at that river. And so that actually happens a lot more than we think it does. Mm-hmm. And so if they get to where somewhere they can be easier to cross into, then development aid can give them aid with the limited amount of supplies, with everything going on, and try to relieve some of the tension that is going on between the countries if there is more of a neutral space that is kind of regulating things.
You're saying, like, find like a legal way for them to get in, basically, so the government can't really intertwine with it.
Yeah.
I get you. Gotcha.
My problem with this whole situation is, does not Honduras have the right to refuse the Salvadorian refugees entrance into their country? While that might not be the kindest biblical perspective, Honduras is not a theocracy. Mm-hmm. Honduras is not founded on biblical principles. Mm-hmm. Instead, they are a political figure. Mm-hmm. And God calls us to respect governments. Mm-hmm. And so I would, while brutally massacring hundreds of people is maybe not the best way to do it, I don't think that Honduras has the responsibility to open their borders.
Yeah, I looked at that too, which is why I'm wanting to go more of that development aid can set up something so they can kind of work with the government, because they do work with local governments, like I said. And it's not just Honduras. It seems to be more than just that. They're not, like they mentioned, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. They all conspired for this massacre. They basically trapped all of them on all sides to do this. So they all don't like what's going on, even though this is going on. There's people leaving their country because of what's going on to try to get somewhere better. And they can close their borders. That is their right. And as Christians, we do respect government authority, but God set the parameters for it. And there are certain things that if a government tells you to try to follow, if it falls within God's parameters, then yes. But if it doesn't, it's unbiblical to try to follow what they're going to. So.
Good. These are good comments. What else? You guys may or may not ever have to deal with this, depending on where God takes you. But sometimes the question arises, do you as an American have a right for the cause of Christ to take action in ministry that will have political consequences? There's a certain sense in which all ministry has some sort of political consequence, because the gospel changes lives, it impacts communities. But I think that you all see that that's not what's happening here. This is not a typical, case of the gospel impacting a community. This is a case where an effort to reach, these refugees actually enters into conflict with political and military maneuvers, very strong feelings. Kenzie, did they actually make it illegal for them to come? Are they breaking the law by coming over?
No, it doesn't seem like, from what the case study mentioned, that it is illegal for them to come in. They just don't like it. It's
Right.
more of the government kind of just sees them as aliens. It doesn't really recognize them.
Mhm.
They don't really like it, but they haven't stopped it.
Mm-hmm.
The only time that they've actually stopped it is by this massacre. Otherwise,
Yeah.
they hadn't really done anything to stop it beforehand, from my knowledge.
Yeah. The military officer made it clear that they didn't like it.
Mhm.
Neither he nor the government.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, the fact that it's not technically illegal might be an argument that someone would use, but the implications of offense and I think what I would say here is that just because something may not be technically illegal doesn't automatically legitimize it. There are other factors to take into consideration to arrive at a decision. That makes sense? What else? Jay, we're talking about right here whether this was legal or illegal, and I think big question that rises here is how much, what right does a foreign entity have to enter into the political affairs of another country, especially on a level like this?
It's hard to say whether or not they actually have any authority, like she was saying, or any sort of weight in the matter at all, really. Because even though that they're like representatives on behalf of like an organization.
So what makes it a case then? What makes it an issue?
Well, it's the moral aspect of it, of just like not doing anything while people are dying. I mean, there's the idea that the man knows that it is right. For the man that knows that it's right but does not do it, to him it is sin. So if they know that the moral right thing is to not have these people die,
Mhm.
and they don't do it, then they're probably their own conviction in their heart
Mhm.
makes them sin.
Mhm.
They know that it's wrong to just let this happen, but they're just.
It does talk about like his struggles, like he wants to bring this to light because what happened was wrong. But he also
Who does? I'm sorry.
I think it was
Ian?
yeah.
Mhm.
He wants to help them bring this to light, and so does his other colleagues. But they also are trying to take into account that they don't want to jeopardize other missions
Mhm.
because they're just a small branch of this company. Like as much as they would want to do that, they don't want to hurt
Mhm.
what the mission is already doing.
Yeah. And Mario, that's his name, Marco, Mario. He, what is his claim? Why does he believe these guys should sign this thing?
The father, or the guy from
The guy that,
found the evidence or had the evidence.
He's
is it Mario or?
Mario Perez. He's a development aides.
Right. What's his argument? Why does he believe they are obligated to sign it?
He quotes Jeremiah,
Yeah.
and I believe that he had a kind of a right context, but also at the same time, I don't think that backs up what's going on. Because as I was looking at kind of what's going around in Jeremiah, it's a completely, I mean, you have to take the context of the Bible, and I don't think that this verse is in the context of what's going on here.
Yeah. There really is nothing in Jeremiah 9 that relates to this issue.
Yeah.
So
That's what threw me for a loop when I read it, and I was like, wait, how does this go along with what's going on?
the problem in Jeremiah's prophecy is what? What's he dealing with in Jeremiah? I mean, I know you probably haven't read through Jeremiah 9, but what is Jeremiah condemning here? I mean, the verse will tell you. Let's look at the verse.
Israel.
Pardon?
Israel.
Well, he's condemning Israel for what?
Not speaking the truth.
Yeah, they're lying. Okay, the leaders are false leaders, they're liars. The issue is that, they're promoting lies in the nation rather than truth. But he's taking that and he's saying, you have an opportunity to reveal the truth, and therefore, you have an obligation to, and he uses Jeremiah 9:3, which has really nothing to do with it. What else, though? There's something else that he says that he uses as leverage to try to get these guys to sign. Has to do with their nationality.
Well, he says he says to Mario, as a Honduran friend, as a brother in Christ. Like, is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, he is a brother in Christ, but there's what is it that Mario says about the American nationality that puts pressure on them, tries to use as leverage? Doesn't he mention the fact that they are Americans and America is an influential country? I don't have the original text. I just have Kenzie's text here in front of me.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I saw where you were looking at.
Yeah.
Go ahead. One of you read it.
They do talk about in that what is supposed to be a neutral zone is supposed to be not controlled by any of the governments, but was kind of under the American government. I did see that, but I'm not sure really what, because it doesn't seem like they're doing much with it, which is why there's freedom fighters and a few other things there.
Amy, is that what you saw, or is that you have a different part of the text?
At the very bottom where it says, as a Quaker and as a U.S. citizen, I want to uphold Mario.
Okay, yeah, that I was thinking there was someplace else where Mario was trying to talk about the influence the U.S. has, that could make a difference. Maybe I misread that, but there are times on a mission field when a country like this, who has access to Americans, truly believe that because you're an American, because you have connections with a country of this stature, of this influence, that taking action will make a difference. In other words, a lot of people don't really understand the implications that you're talking about of a foreign country coming in, and they're just looking at it as, simple citizens saying, you're Americans. America has authority in the whole world. When an American speaks, the whole world listens. So you've got to do something. And you want to be careful, if you're an American in a country like that, not to cave to pressure like that, because normally when that kind of a statement is made, it reveals, and not to criticize the guy, but it reveals a lack of understanding as to how political systems work together. A lot of times, all those people think is, you're American, you have power, you have influence, do something. And it's not that easy. Let me ask you guys this. Do Ian and David have the authority to sign this?
That's what I would say no. Yeah. That was like my biggest thing, is especially Father Walters said something like he, to Ian and David, he said, as Christians and as representatives of a powerful international Christian humanitarian agency, would you sign this? And like, I just don't think it's within their authority.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think that's the phrase that I was referring to. It wasn't exactly what I remember. Yeah, a powerful American.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not their place to sign for the whole agency.
They have not been invested with that authority.
Yeah.
They would actually be usurping authority and misrepresenting the organization by doing so. Yeah.
Does the agency that does that work there, are they purely more for just like helping with keeping people alive, or is there like an actual focus on like gospel like spreading?
I don't think it says.
It seems like the organization is just more about like helping like refugees and people in like human crises and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's called development aid in Latin America, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah.
To me, it's like, it's so much different than like a mission agency where their main goal is purely to get people saved. And it's a bit harder for them to like get involved in like.
Okay, let me ask you a question then, Jay. Let's just switch the story a little bit and say that these guys are missionaries. This is church evangelism, church planting effort.
Yeah.
Would that change the scenario? Would that affect their legitimacy in signing this or not?
I feel like it would, because I feel like the differences in like the agency or the organization's mission and goal would be a lot different. Because like their goal, like in the story, is to help like people that are in need, that are suffering, that are dying. And here's a case where those exact people in need are being killed. And so it'd be kind of against their whole mission and their goal of helping people survive by not helping them survive.
Okay, but would that if it was evangelistic at its core, would that legitimize Ian and David signing a document on behalf of the mission that they represent?
Probably not. Maybe on the behalf of their sending church, but I think the agency has the agency would have to like make a board meeting or something and make a decision on it. Because
the document they're signing is going to have political implications. You kind of have to ask yourself, where is this going to land? This document is going to end up in whose hands and be interpreted by whom? And obviously it's going to end up in the hands of politicians and military people. And what you got to be really careful of here is that you don't take action that's going to shed a certain light on the agency itself that may or may not represent the agency. You know what I'm saying? So even if it is an evangelistic organization, these guys have to be very careful about what they do that may or may not represent the agency correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So they're definitely going to have to ask the agency for permission first.
Or I would say, I would even take a step further and say refuse to sign the document and put the onus of responsibility on the development aid ministry to take that action if they feel so led. make it an official document. These guys don't have, I don't think, they don't speak officially for they're servants there. They're investigating. They're doing some survey work. But this is where, man, you got to be careful. You don't sign something that puts the agency in trouble. If it's going to happen, it needs to come from them.
So how does that? Well, does that resolve the kind of like struggle between the convictions that they're having to sign this?
Is that a hand or just you guys drinking coffee? What do you think? Can they live with themselves? In other words, can they have a clear conscience doing this?
To be honest with you, like if something like this was happening, I might I don't know if they're on like a work visa because of it or whatever, but because they're part of the agency. But I mean, if they're feeling like that convicted about it, like they might even like quit the agency to sign this.
Mhm.
Then it's not like they're representing the agency anymore, but
But the reason that Water Waters is wanting them to sign this is because of the agency they represent.
yeah.
It has more power behind it, which is what they want.
And J2, even if they left the agency and then signed it, as it looks to the people, they're still associated with that group. In other words, just formally cutting the ties doesn't eliminate the association that the populace makes between them and the agency. You know what I'm saying? If I were in Brazil and I decided to quit Baptist Mid-Missions, probably most people there would still associate me with the same group, even though formally I've severed my ties. Yeah. When it comes to political implications in any ministry, you have to walk circumspectly. And that's not to say that there's not a way to resolve this. I think one of the things we have to eliminate is this idea that, well, this is going to have to be decided right here and right now. It's either yes or no. I mean, this guy said, I'm coming back, what did he say, in 4 days or something?
He said he was coming back at noon the next
At noon the next day. Okay, that's another thing. If you feel that kind of a pressure, okay, man, he's coming back at noon the next day. We got to have a decision by then. My question is, who says? You see, and a lot of times in ministry, poor decisions have been made because of perceived pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying there's not a sense of urgency here because of the suffering, but you got to be really careful because you could actually compound the suffering and the problems by making a hasty and unthought through decision. There's nothing wrong with these guys saying, we're going to walk slowly and carefully. This has been happening for a long time. It's going to continue to happen, and we have to be responsible because in an effort to do what's right now, you may cause waves that actually create further problems as a result. And even though you may not be able to fully avoid those, you want to be careful. Don't feel pressured to making a decision as an American missionary on foreign soil when you haven't really thought through and dealt with the implications. Because you may decide in the end, it's right to sign it. But you want to make sure that you've done your homework. Because politics can be a lot of ministries have been destroyed by poor political decisions on the field and actually made it impossible for future missionaries to enjoy ministry in that location. So you've got to consider the long-term implications of what you're about to do. How will this affect the ability of others to come in after me to do the work of the Lord? It may complicate it.
Is there a way for them, just thinking of their consciences? And I know that, like we mentioned, the reason they want these guys to sign is because of the power that they have, from the agency. Mm-hmm. But is there a way for them to sign and not represent the agency, but just have their individual names on it to maybe ease their conscience or just provide more names? Or if just Mario and not David and Ian?
Well, Mario, it's not like he's already in. He's going to sign it.
Yeah.
He's a national. He's a Honduran.
He's with the agency, though.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. They mentioned...
Yeah, what's his position again?
Development aids staff person, but he's a Honduran.
Yeah, but he's still a staff person, so there's still an ethical responsibility for him to consult the leadership.
I think they said that they're gonna follow whatever Ian decides.
Yeah, you see, and that happens too. Here's a Honduran organization, right? And yet, because of their view of America as a superior, more developed, they leave the situation in their hands. And that's another form of pressure that you really have to. I mean, you may be accused of, here's an American that has the ability, has the influence, he does nothing. You may have to swallow your pride and say, okay, if they think that, I know that that's not the reason. I know that I'm trying to be responsible and careful. But I mean, there were times in Brazil when I was accused, not in this type of a scenario, but as an American, I had the ability to help somebody or do something, and I didn't. So I said, Americano, and he didn't do anything. And I have to swallow my pride and say, there's a reason why I didn't do anything in that situation. And to try to explain it to some people, is probably going to be to waste your breath because just like the idea that Americans are rich, no matter how much you try to tell them, no, I had to spend 3 years raising support, or whatever. No, America equals rich. Nate, Jade?
On the flip side, is there any sort of backlash that the organization and the workers there could receive for not supporting?
I would say this. It's much less likely that harm is done for taking too much time to think about it and consider it, as long as the organization offers the reasoning behind their decision. If they just say, nope, we're not helping, with no explanation, then they're setting themselves up for criticism, and rightly so. If the organization says, look, we've prayed this through, we've talked this through, and these are the reasons why we don't feel that we should sign this, at least you're showing people that you've prayed through responsibly and you've given them some reasons why. Whether they accept it or not, we live in a broken world. They may or may not. So I think the biggest lesson that I can offer you guys in this is to be careful that you don't feel pressure if you're in a situation like this, because you're an American, because people expect you to have influence and power, and be careful that you don't succumb to that pressure, okay? And it's easy to succumb to it if we're convinced that people will never understand why we're not doing something. And sometimes you just have to swallow your pride and say, this is what I feel is right. There's no easy answer, just like we've seen in all of our case studies. It's always going to be challenging. But when it comes to politics and stirring up possible political strife, you want to be especially careful, not just because of the immediate implications, but because of how that may affect future open doors for missionaries and people that come in and serve. Okay, keep the big picture in mind. Sad, and Kenzie, you made a good point when you said this is happening all the time. I mean, everywhere you look in the world, there are refugees, Ukraine, in Africa, you look at 100,000 people that came in from South America, when Biden was elected. That's a little different situation. It still involves a lot of people pouring in from another country. It's tough. All right. So black and white? No. It's not black and white. Walk carefully. Do your homework, get your information before you make a decision. Once you make the decision, it's too late. You're done. Either good or bad. All right, folks. Hey, well, let's just plan to meet. It's at 10 o'clock on Wednesday?
Tuesday.
I'm sorry, Tuesday. We'll meet briefly and chat and wrap it up. Thank you all very much. Did a great job this semester.